I paid my family's bills then I discovered they mocked me behind my back. I never thought my own family could betray me. I had always believed in loyalty and showing up for the people I loved, even when it meant putting my own life on hold. My cousin, Mara, was supposed to be the one I could count on. Growing up, we were inseparable, sharing childhood memories, summer vacations, and family dinners where laughter echoed through the halls. I watched her stumble through life, struggling with finances, relationships, and her own insecurities, and I stepped in without hesitation. When Mara's husband left her with 2 small kids and mounting debts, I didn't think twice. I helped pay the bills, covered groceries, and even took them on small vacations to keep the kids from feeling the tension at home. I believed it was the right thing to do, that family had to stick together, that blood meant something. I was proud, in a quiet, unspoken way, of the safety net I had become for her and her children. But everything changed one evening. I had just finished a long shift at work, exhausted and craving nothing more than a quiet night at home. My phone buzzed incessantly on the kitchen counter, but I ignored it at first, thinking it was another group chat notification. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. My stomach dropped. Mara had sent me a video, accidentally, I later found out, of my own family in the living room, whispering and laughing. They were talking about me. My mother, my father, even my aunt, and Mara's own brother. They were calling me a pathetic failure and mocking everything I had done for Mara's family. They joked about how I paid for things that should have been Mara's responsibility and how they couldn't understand why I bothered. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Years of sacrifices, late nights, financial stress, all reduced to a joke in someone else's eyes. I stayed silent for hours. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to confront them all at once, but I couldn't. Part of me hoped it was a misunderstanding, a cruel trick of words taken out of context. But deep down, I knew the truth. My family had been talking behind my back for years. The person I trusted most, Mara, had sent me the video, but I couldn't tell if it was an accident or deliberate. My heart ached. How could someone I supported, someone I had given so much to, be part of this? That night, I lay awake, replaying the video in my mind. The laughter, the casual cruelty, the dismissive tone, it all haunted me. I tried to rationalize, telling myself maybe they didn't mean it, that words are different from actions. But I couldn't ignore the sting of betrayal. Something had to be done. I couldn't let this slide. The question was what? I decided I would wait. I would bide my time, continue to appear calm, polite, generous. But inside, I was planning. I didn't know exactly what, yet, but the thought of reclaiming my dignity, of showing them that their scorn wouldn't break me, consumed me. And Mara had no idea that the person she leaned on so heavily, might be the one who would one day turn the tables in the most unexpected way. I went to sleep that night with a heavy heart and a quiet determination. The next day, I had to act normal, but every smile I forced, every polite conversation I had, was a mask. Behind it, I was gathering every detail, every piece of leverage, every secret. Because if betrayal had taught me one thing, it was this: loyalty without respect is dangerous, and I was done being taken for granted. The following morning, I walked into Mara's house as if nothing had happened. I smiled at her kids, offered to help with breakfast, and even joked about some trivial mishap with the dishwasher. Mara, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, hugged me tightly and thanked me again for always being there. Her words should have warmed me, but instead, they felt like salt in an open wound. I realized then that her gratitude was performative, a mask she wore while secretly participating in the betrayal I had just witnessed. I decided I needed to gather evidence. If my family thought they could talk about me behind my back, I would make sure I knew everything, every comment, every whisper, every subtle slight. I started paying attention to conversations, casually noting what was said when I was not listening. It was heartbreaking how quickly my image was twisted in their eyes. Every act of generosity, every favor, every sacrifice, I was painted as a fool, a puppet, a punching bag for amusement. One evening, I overheard Mara on the phone with her brother. She laughed in that same mocking tone I had heard in the video. "Yeah, He'll just pay again, she said. He's hopeless, but at least he makes it easy. My stomach churned. My heart pounded with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. Instead, I recorded the conversation on my phone. I was collecting proof. Every slip, every lie, every derisive remark would be saved. I wanted the day to come when they couldn't dismiss my pain or twist the story against me. Meanwhile, Mara's kids continued to adore me. They didn't understand what was happening, and I wasn't about to let them feel the tension. I played the role of the kind, dependable adult, the hero they could always rely on. But every hug, every smile, every innocent question from them made the betrayal hurt more. The weight of it pressed down on me like a physical force, but I reminded myself, patience, revenge, or at least vindication, would have to be calculated. Then, the opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. Mara asked me to help her sort out a financial problem, another debt, another bill she couldn't pay. I agreed, of course. But this time, I didn't just hand over the money. I scrutinized her bank statements, her spending, her lifestyle. I found discrepancies, luxury items she had bought while claiming she couldn't afford groceries, unnecessary subscriptions, and even a few cash withdrawals with vague explanations. She had been taking advantage of my generosity all along, lying to me, trusting that I would never question it. I confronted her, not with anger, not with shouting, but quietly, with cold precision. Mara, I said, holding up her bank statement, I don't know how you've been justifying this to yourself, but I've seen everything. Every lie, every excuse, every hardship you claim to be suffering. Her face turned pale. For a moment, I thought I had shocked her, but then she laughed, a nervous, deflecting sound. It's not what it looks like, she said. You're overreacting. You're taking this too seriously. Her denial was infuriating, but I didn't lose control. I simply smiled quietly. I'm not overreacting, I said. I'm just getting started. The days that followed were tense, a silent battlefield that only I knew existed. Mara continued to act as if nothing had changed, smiling and laughing when I entered her home. But I could see the small cracks in her composure, the way she avoided my gaze, the slight trembling in her hands when she handed me bills, the carefully constructed stories that no longer held water. I realized something important. People who betray will always try to cover their tracks, but the truth has a way of revealing itself in the smallest details. I started documenting everything meticulously. Conversations, receipts, texts, even casual offhand comments. They were all logged and time-stamped. I had become a quiet observer of my own family's duplicity. And yet, I couldn't reveal it all at once. Patience was my weapon, and I intended to wield it with precision. The satisfaction wouldn't come from shouting or confrontation. It would come from orchestrating a moment where every lie, every betrayal, every act of mockery was exposed, undeniable and public. One afternoon, Mara's children asked me to play in the yard. Their laughter was infectious, but my mind was elsewhere. I watched her through the kitchen window, pretending to tidy up while really observing. She was on the phone again, speaking in hushed tones. He's acting weird, but he'll come around, she said. Just wait a little longer, and he'll be back to paying everything. You'll see. My blood boiled. She had been manipulating me the entire time, relying on my kindness and sense of responsibility. I realized she didn't see me as a cousin, a friend, or even as family. She saw me as a resource, a person to exploit. I knew I had to act carefully. Any impulsive move could backfire, turning me into the villain in their eyes, reinforcing the narrative they had already created. I started planting subtle reminders of my own worth. Small gestures that highlighted what I had sacrificed, what I had done, without revealing the storm I was brewing. I volunteered to help Mara's children with their schoolwork in front of neighbors, quietly fixed their broken toys, paid for their extracurricular activities, all while she took the credit when anyone else saw it. And then, one evening, the tipping point arrived. Mara had organized a family dinner at her house, inviting relatives from both sides. Everyone was there, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and Mara's closest friends. The air was thick with pretension, with smiles that didn't reach the eyes. I had suspected that tonight would bring an opportunity, and I was ready. As the evening progressed, I let small, seemingly innocuous comments slip into conversation, guiding the narrative with precision. I asked about certain bills Mara had mentioned, about payments I had made, about little discrepancies I had noticed. Her nervousness was palpable. I could see her shifting in her seat, glancing at her brother for support, but they were unprepared for the subtle trap I was setting. I was not angry. I was calm, methodical, lethal in my restraint. By the time dessert arrived, the tension in the room had shifted. Eyes darted nervously between Mara and me. The laughter that once mocked me in the video was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. I realized that for the first time in years, they were genuinely afraid. They couldn't dismiss me, couldn't laugh off my questions, couldn't manipulate the narrative anymore. I had them on the defensive, and it felt intoxicating. Not for vengeance alone, but for justice, for recognition of the countless sacrifices they had dismissed. Mara's hand shook as she reached for her wine glass, and I noticed the faint tremor that betrayed her composed facade. "Is everything okay?" I asked, voice steady but deliberate, drawing attention to her discomfort. She forced a laugh, a high, brittle sound that failed to mask her panic. My parents exchanged glances, their smiles faltering. My father cleared his throat, uneasy. For the first time, the room felt uncomfortably small, like the walls themselves were closing in around Mara and her carefully maintained illusions. I decided it was time to escalate. "I've been going through some of the bills and statements," I said, casually setting my phone on the table, open to a folder labeled with dates and amounts. "It's fascinating how some expenses suddenly appear and then vanish from explanations. I thought it might have been a mistake at first, but it seems more deliberate." My tone was calm, almost conversational, but the words hung in the air like a blade. The tension thickened. Mara's eyes widened, darting toward her brother, who looked as if he wished he could vanish. Her aunt, who had always had a sharp tongue, whispered something under her breath, but it wasn't enough to drown out the unease spreading through the room. I pressed on. "It's funny how I always end up helping, yet somehow my intentions are always questioned. I pay for things, I cover the essentials. I try to make life easier for everyone, but what do I get in return? Laughter behind my back? Mockery?" The words felt heavy, yet measured. I wasn't yelling. I was building a case, showing my hand one calculated move at a time. Mara's face turned crimson. You're twisting everything," she stammered. Her brother jumped in, attempting to defend her. "It's not like that. You're overreacting." I cut him off with a quiet, sharp smile. Am I overreacting? Or am I finally seeing what's been happening all these years? All the times I covered debts, all the meals I paid for, all the sacrifices I made, and for what? So I could be laughed at. The room went silent. I could feel the eyes of everyone upon me. Then I did something unexpected. I played the video Mara had sent me by accident, the one where my family had mocked me, whispered about my failures, and laughed as if my sacrifices were meaningless. The sound filled the room. Every giggle, every sarcastic comment, every whispered insult echoed against the walls. I watched their expressions change in real time. The shock, the shame, the helplessness. Mara's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. My parents froze, caught between denial and guilt. It was surreal watching their reactions. The laughter I had endured for years had finally been mirrored back to them. For the first time, they experienced what felt like to be powerless, exposed, and vulnerable. I had never intended to humiliate anyone publicly, but the truth had a way of asserting itself, and I had merely given it a stage. Mara's husband, who had been out of the picture for years, would have recognized the irony if he were there. But for now, it was just us, and I could feel the scales of power shifting. I closed my laptop slowly, savoring the moment. "I've stayed silent for too long," I said. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Silence is observation. And now, finally, you've seen me. Not as the person you mocked, not as the one you used, but as someone who's been here all along, quietly keeping track, quietly standing up for myself. Mara's eyes filled with tears, but not a single word escaped her. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was clarity. I had drawn the line, made them see the consequences of underestimating me, and reclaimed the dignity they had stripped away. But even as I watched their shock, a new realization settled in my chest. Forgiveness wouldn't come easily, not from them, and not from me. This was only the beginning. The days after that dinner were a strange mix of tension and uneasy civility. Mara avoided me when possible, but her children still ran to me with open arms, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents swirling around them. Every visit, every interaction was a reminder that my actions had consequences beyond just my own satisfaction. I was no longer just a cousin, a helper, a caretaker. I had become a presence that demanded recognition, one that could no longer be dismissed. My parents, on the other hand, oscillated between guilt and denial. My mother would make awkward attempts at small talk, her voice tight and rehearsed, while my father avoided me entirely, retreating to study for hours on end. It was clear they were struggling with the cognitive dissonance of having mocked me for years and now being confronted with the reality of their behavior. Even my aunt, who had laughed the loudest in the video, now gave me nervous, perfunctory smiles whenever our paths crossed. Mara, however, was the hardest to read. She oscillated between contrition and defiance. One day, she approached me with a nervous smile, her eyes darting to make sure no one was watching. I'm sorry, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. I didn't mean for you to see that. I didn't think. Her voice trailed off. I held her gaze, silently assessing the sincerity behind her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, but I had learned over the years that words were cheap. Actions revealed the truth. Instead of replying immediately, I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, Mara, it's not about what you meant or didn't mean. It's about what's real. I've seen the truth, and I've felt the consequences. Apologies don't erase the past. They only hint at the possibility of a future that may or may not be honest. Her shoulders slumped, and she left without another word. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I reflected on the path I had taken. For years, I had been generous, patient, and forgiving, believing in the inherent goodness of family. And yet, I had been mocked, used, and betrayed. The revelation had left a scar, a permanent awareness that trust must be earned, not assumed. But along with that pain came a strange sense of empowerment. I had learned how to observe, how to plan, and how to stand my ground without losing myself in anger. The next opportunity for confrontation arose unexpectedly. Mara's brother, the one who had often acted as her enabler, came to me under the pretense of reconciliation. He invited me to meet him at a quiet cafe, away from the prying eyes of the rest of the family. I agreed, curious to see whether he would truly acknowledge his role in the betrayal or attempt to manipulate me again. He arrived, casual in appearance, but with a subtle tension radiating off him. I wanted to talk, he said, settling across from me. About everything. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Go on, I said. He hesitated, as if weighing every word. We were wrong, he finally admitted. It's clear now. We underestimated you. We thought you'd always forgive, that you'd never challenge us. But you have. And it's humbling, to be honest. I studied him carefully, sensing both fear and honesty in his voice. It's not about humility, I replied. It's about awareness. You've seen what happens when loyalty is taken for granted. You've seen what it's like to cross someone and assume they'll never act. That assumption was a mistake. He nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of my words. I could tell he realized the precarious position he was now in, and it gave me a strange satisfaction. But even as he spoke, I felt a flicker of something else, anger that hadn't yet been fully resolved. Mara's betrayal wasn't just a single act. It was a pattern, a lifetime of assumptions that my kindness could be exploited. And while their acknowledgement was a small victory, I knew the true test was whether they would change, or if I would need to take more decisive action to ensure my dignity was never questioned again. The days turned into weeks, and while Mara's family tiptoed around me with a newfound caution, life outside their shadow continued. Yet I couldn't shake the lingering tension. Every family gathering, every phone call, every casual invitation carried an invisible weight. They had tasted the consequences of betrayal, and it had left them wary, but that wariness didn't erase the years of exploitation and mockery. I knew I had to be strategic. The next move would define how this story ended. Then came the incident that would tip the scales completely. Mara had arranged a birthday party for her eldest child, inviting a mix of family and neighbors. I attended, as I always had, ready to interact with the children and keep the party smooth. But I had a plan. I quietly positioned myself where I could overhear conversations, capturing everything that was said. The children laughed and played, blissfully unaware, while adults exchanged small talk, subtle jabs, and, in some cases, veiled apologies. Halfway through the party, Mara's brother started to boast, loudly and carelessly, about a financial arrangement he had orchestrated behind my back. "Oh, he never knew," he said with a laugh. "We just let him handle the bills. He's so generous. He doesn't even question anything." Can you imagine? My fingers tightened around my glass as I listened. Every word confirmed what I already suspected. They still underestimated me, still assumed that my kindness made me blind. I decided it was time for a demonstration, a lesson they wouldn't forget. Calmly, I stood, attracting the attention of everyone in the room. "You think I don't hear you?" I said, my voice steady, carrying authority. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mara froze mid-conversation, her face pale. "You assume I don't notice. You assume I don't remember. You assume I'll continue to be blind to your lies." I continued, pacing slowly, letting each word land. "But I do. I have. And tonight it stops." I pulled out my phone and played the recordings I had gathered over the past months. The whispered insults, the mocking laughter, the casual admissions of manipulation. One by one, the comments of every adult present filled the room. The shock was immediate and intense. Mara's mother gasped, covering her mouth. Her brother's face went pale, and Mara's lips quivered as she struggled to maintain composure. For the first time, the mockery was reversed, the power shifted, and they experienced exactly how it felt to be exposed and vulnerable. The children watched silently, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. I turned to them and smiled gently, a small gesture to reassure them. "I'm still here for you," I said softly. "I always will be." And then I faced the adults again, my expression calm but unwavering. "For years, you've taken advantage of my kindness, laughed at my sacrifices, and treated me like a joke. Tonight, you've seen the reality." Mara tried to speak, stammering apologies, but her words fell flat, drowned by the undeniable evidence. My parents looked at me with a mix of guilt and fear. Even my aunt, the one who had once sneered openly at me, now seemed to shrink into herself. The room was heavy with realization. I had not raised my voice. I had not screamed or threatened. I had only revealed the truth, and in doing so, I had reclaimed control. And yet, even as I felt the surge of vindication, a part of me wondered, would this be enough? Would their awareness translate into real change, or would the bitterness linger, poisoning every future interaction? I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing with certainty: the balance had shifted. I was no longer the one being used or mocked. From this moment on, they would think twice before underestimating me again. The aftermath of the birthday confrontation was chaotic, but in a subdued, almost invisible way. Mara's family no longer treated me with the casual disregard they had for years. Their smiles were cautious, their conversations carefully moderated. Every interaction carried an undercurrent of awareness, a recognition that the game had changed. But I quickly realized that fear alone wouldn't restore the respect I deserved. It was a fragile foundation. I needed something more, a demonstration that my position wasn't temporary, that my voice and choices carried real consequences. I began to set boundaries. Subtle at first, but deliberate. When Mara asked for help, I no longer offered it automatically. When bills or errands came up, I requested transparency, proper explanations, and accountability. The first time she balked, I calmly reminded her of everything I had done for her family over the years. "I've been more than generous, Mara," I said. "But generosity without respect is exploitation. I'm willing to help, but on my terms with honesty." She stared at me, mouth slightly open, clearly unsettled. The subtle power play extended to the wider family. I no longer participated in their gossip, no longer allowed myself to be a silent participant in conversations where my sacrifices were belittled. I became a quiet observer again, but this time with authority. My phone, My notes and my recordings remained tools I could use if necessary, silent reminders that I was not to be underestimated. One evening, Mara's husband called me unexpectedly. He had been absent from their lives for years, but apparently he had heard about the birthday incident and wanted to discuss it. Please help me get 5 likes on the video for the second part of the story. Follow and like for more.